Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, or it could be whiskey with an analyst reading a spreadsheet, linking crime events, identifying a series, and getting the latest scoop on association news and training. So please don't beat that analyst and join us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
How are we doing, analyst? Jason Elder here with another LEA podcast deep dive, Open Secrets. And with me is Jan Mondale. Jan, how are we doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you, Jason.
In our first episode, we talked a little bit about the basics. We even talked about library, which is really a basic concept as we're talking about open source intelligence. And so we're going to kind of stick with that theme a little bit of just slowly going into more basics. To some people, it might be an old hat or old information, but for some, they either may have never learned some of these techniques we're going to go over today, but others they might have forgotten to use them. So I think it's good to go over. So what are we going over today, Jan?
We're going to go over some really basics of actually searching for information on the internet. And I'm talking mostly about Google searching, but don't forget that Bing is out there, and there are other search engines besides those that in future episodes I'll go into more detail on. But at the end of the show notes that Jason will be posting is a little table that shows what search shortcuts are available for Google and Bing, and what work on Google, what work on Bing, and what work on both. And so if there are questions about that, please just reach out. I'd be happy to answer them. I have a whole presentation that I've done in the past before about the differences between Google and Bing, and why I think using Bing sometimes is better than using Google. But to get started today, I want to talk a little bit about how in a formal search environment, say you work for a prosecutor or you work for a detective, you're an investigative support analyst, or you're just a regular consumer looking for stuff on the internet to either answer a question, or you're looking to buy something, or you're looking to find a vendor of some kind, or you're a corporate executive trying to make sure that your company is not being hacked by a bad actor. All of those kinds of things, you might want to start off with an internet search. And like I said, for the most part, that means a Google search. In a formal environment, you're going to want to sit down and think about what your search terms are and how you want to go about it, and what are the best places to look for the information you're looking for. When you have the benefit of time, for example, if you're doing an investigation for a detective, or you're doing work for a prosecutor or something, you have more time to think about how you want that search to work. So you're going to be wanting to think of keywords and search terms and things to use. And you're going to want to do a hypothetical, like what would happen if I did the search this way versus what would happen if I did the search that way. And you're going to want to spend a lot more time on it. But sometimes you just want to type a quick search into the search engine box or the browser search engine box. And you just want to know what the capital of Tennessee is, for example, or something. You don't need to go into a lot of formal coming up with keywords and things like that. Nowadays, both Google and Bing search engines and other search engines are pretty smart. And if it's indexed, it's in there. And they understand if you ask something in the form of a question, it'll give you a quick answer. And that'll usually be your first search result. So you don't have to worry about easy things like that. What you're thinking about is you're trying to find out everything you can about an individual, and you want to think about how different ways of spelling that person's name, or different nicknames that, say, a person named Charles might go by Chuck or Chaz, or all kinds of things like that. You're going to want to think about different ways of searching. But you don't need to do that if you're doing a quick search. But you will get better results if you know about different kinds of search terms. So several years ago, and don't quote me on any of this because a lot of things have changed, especially with Facebook. But several years ago, I was asked to, when I was an investigative analyst, I was asked to find the names of members of a outlaw motorcycle gang in a city in my state. Okay, that's sounds like a really hard question, but it's not really, because for example, in this case, I was working with somebody who was an outlaw motorcycle gang, or OMG expert, so I could shoot some ideas off of them, like what kinds of things do you think would show up in a search for names of people in this motorcycle gang and things like that. And so we were able to come up with a list of keywords to use in searches. And one thing that this person knew was this particular gang had no restrictions on what they could put on social media. Some gangs, like the Hells Angels, are very strict about their members not posting even anonymously on any social media sites. They're pretty strict about it. I don't know what the punishment is if you break their rule, but they're really strict about it. This particular gang, which will come out when I give some of my examples, at least at that time, and they may have changed, had no qualms about posting on social media, especially Facebook, using something like Bandito Bob. And so all I had to do was come up with search terms, and I used Facebook because at that time that was a really ripe area to find information about people, because people used to use Facebook all the time. I don't think that's so much true anymore, and they posted everything about what they had for breakfast, what they watched on TV last night. Everything was on Facebook. So anyway, we came up with a list of words, and like I said, as you can probably tell, it was the Bandito motorcycle gang, and it was people in a city. And all I did was open up Facebook and do a search for Bandito, and then I just picked Bob because that's such a common name, and that worked. And I found somebody who lived in that city who's went by the tag of Bandito Bob. And so then all you do is you go into Facebook and you search for all of that person's friends and relatives and pictures and everything. Now, bear in mind also, this has to be a public Facebook page. Sure. He was a private person. I wouldn't have shown up. None of this would have shown up. So this public Facebook page, totally open information. It's on him whether or not he wanted to be private, and he apparently didn't. And so I was able to find actual photos of him wearing jackets with his patches on it, proudly showing off who he was. But I was also able to find all of his friends and all of his friends' spouses. Spouses are really good about posting about what their spouses are doing. So even if they didn't have a tag of Bandito Bob or Bandito Bill or something like that, their spouse might have a photo of a spouse out there who's a friend of Bandito Bob's spouse, might have on her Facebook page photos of her spouse wearing his patches. So these are just things to think about. What's the best place to look for something? In this case, several years ago, finding members of the Bandito motorcycle gang was pretty easy to do on Facebook. I probably searched a couple of other places, but I came up with a list of about 25 members in this one city just using Facebook. So that's a pretty easy way, but I still had to know a little bit about the subject. Unfortunately, I was working with an OMG expert, and they knew enough about this particular gang that there was a chance I'd find them on social media. Again, with the Hells Angels, it's not as easy. You've got to come up with other ways of finding members of the Hells Angels. You might even have to use human intelligence and hang out around their clubhouses, because their clubhouses are pretty open. I mean, I've been through cities in the Southwest or little towns in the Southwest that right on the main drag, there's a Hells Angels clubhouse. So you might have to, in that case, if you're working with an investigator, the investigator is going to have to do some human intelligence, maybe hang out in front of the clubhouse and take pictures of license plates on motorcycles or something like that. But if you're just looking on social media for an easy to find person, then that's what you do. You just do that. And it's really easy. Some other things, the people who've been doing this for a long time and new people need to remember that Boolean operators, the and, or, and not operators, will help you out. So in Google and Bing and most other major search engines, and is assumed. So you want Bandito and Bob, and you put that down in your search box, and you're going to get every result of everything that Google has indexed or Bing has indexed that have the word Bandito and the word Bob somewhere in either the web page or the document or whatever you're looking for. Obviously, you would probably want to narrow that down by putting quotation marks around it so that at least Bandito and Bob show up together and not just somewhere on the same page, because it'll narrow your searches down a lot. But let's say you want something like Bandito or Mongol. You want everything about the Banditos and everything about, and then after it's found everything about the Banditos, it will then search for everything about the Mongols. So that's an or operator. That broadens your search. it makes it so that your search is bigger. And sometimes you want that. What I do when I do an or search is I usually modify it with another keyword. For example, I would put in parentheses, I would put Mongol or Bandito, and or has to be capitalized. And then out of the parentheses, I would put something like motorcycle. So it would be apparent to the search engine that I was maybe looking for a motorcycle gang and not just the Frito Bandito and Mongols from Mongolia, because you're going to get millions of hits if you do that. So you kind of, even though you want a broader search, you don't want it so broad that you'll never find what you're looking for. And of course, there are way more ways to modify searches than just a question. And or.
Just a question on that. So then in that case, it's going to give you motorcycle, and there's one of two, which is going to be Bandito or Monk.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Actually, it'll be both. It'll search for everything before the or, so Banditos, and then it'll include all of the hits for everything after the or. So you're going to get you're still going to get Banditos and Mongols, but it's going to do a search. It won't and them together until after it's searched for everything on Banditos and then everything on Mongols, and then it'll and it together. That sounds confusing. On the show notes, there's a diagram that shows exactly what an or is, and it's two circles with overlapping parts of the circle, and the or is in the overlapping part of the circle. Well, both of those circles are completely included, whereas with the and one, only the and ones. Anyway, you have to look at the show notes. It's hard to explain this.
Yeah, and I guess
non-visually.
The only reason I was thinking it was that way because you said that the and was by default, and so
and is by default. In fact, Google won't even recognize if you type and into a search. It's a stop word for Google. It just assumes that you mean both of those things or all three of those things. If you have Mongols, Banditos, and Hell's Angels, well, and in that case, if you don't put quotation marks around Hell's Angels, you're going to get everything that mentions Hells and everything that mentioned angels. So it adds all of those things together. So maybe a better way to look at it is with the show notes. It says endangered and birds. So you will only get pages that include endangered and birds on, but not necessarily next to each other. Okay. In the or, you receive either you will receive all of the pages that have endangered and all of the pages that have birds, and then all of the pages that have both of those words together. You're going to receive everything. So it's going to be millions more hits. Because unlike the and, where both things have to be on the same page, not necessarily together, but they have to be on the same page. With an or search, those individual terms will be on a page, not necessarily both terms on the page. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think with it always gets a little bit challenging. I do this even when I am writing code and writing a SQL statement. You got to be careful. And that's why we use parentheses in SQL terms, just to make sure we telling the code to do exactly what we're expecting. But
Right.
And it does get a little bit gnarly once you're talking about using multiple ors and multiple ands.
Oh yeah, you definitely, that's when you really need to start using your parentheses to tie the different phrases together. So then the last Boolean search operator is the not operator, and it's capitalized NOT. Or not doesn't work on Google either, but it actually works better on Bing to actually spell it out. But Google uses the minus sign, and it has to be immediately in front of the word you want to exclude. So for example, when I do a search on my name, which I do a lot just to test out different kinds of search techniques, I will do Jan Mondale, not Walter, and that's, I do a lot of nots, but that's the big one I use. Otherwise, I end up with a ton of results that have my name in them, but also have Walter Mondale's name in them, or Joan Mondale, his wife. So that's usually a not also. It's not Joan. But yeah, I'll have a whole string of minus words when I'm doing a search on a name. And you should think about doing that too. If you're searching for a person's name and you for a fact that they don't go by Chuck, then put not Chuck in there. Like you're looking for Charles Daniels, or Yeah, Charles Daniels. And you don't want Charlie Daniels. You don't want Chuck Daniels. You want Charles Daniels. Then you're going to put a not Chuck and not Charlie.
Yeah. I'm always a little hesitant about using the not. And it's not usually for work purposes or anything. I'm just usually, if I'm looking something specific up, some idea or maybe a recipe, for instance, I'm always
Right.
a little leery about that because it might say on the page, it's not this, this is what it is.
Right.
And then when it says that, if you have that not in there, that means that page is going to be totally excluded from the results because I told Google not to
Yeah,
count
that's
anything.
why you need to play around with your searches.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're not getting the results you want, I mean, you have to think about before you even start a search, you should think about what you want the answer to be.
Sure.
And so, sometimes you have to play around a lot to get the right answer. Let's say you were looking for someone to clean your kitchen and you typed in kitchen cleaner. You're going to get a ton of answers that have kitchen cleaners in them, but not necessarily a person who's going to clean your kitchen. So you have to
Yeah.
think about what your search terms are before you start searching. And if you're not getting the answers you want or you think that you should have, then you need to think about changing how you approach the search.
Yeah, I was laughing right then because Google will always say like return like 1 billion results in like a
Yeah.
half a second, and I'm like, man, how many people aren't? I mean, people probably aren't going to page 2, let alone page 3,
Yeah.
4, or 5
I've
on the results.
I've tested that out to see how far down I can go. Typically, you're lucky if you can get to page 10 before Google just says further search results are not shown because they're duplicative or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember exactly what Google
Exactly. They
says,
say
but
that. Yep.
yeah, you never get to 1 billion pages. Yeah. So you never have to worry about that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, as what I think of myself as a professional searcher, I'll go past the first page, but I also set my Google search. You can go into settings on a Google search page. You can go into settings and set the search results to 100. So you'll get a lot more results that way on your first page. And then you probably won't have to go to your second page.
Yep.
Some other things I just wanted to bring up in the show notes. There's on the last page of the show notes, there's a chart that shows different kinds of search terms, and it includes Google and Bing. But when you're using search terms beyond the Boolean operators, remember, for example, you might be doing a site search. You can do a search that only searches a specific web page or a site, and you do that with you type in SITE : and then your search term or the name of your site or whatever. Anyway, the main thing is you don't want a space between the colon and your first search term on any of the search operators. And a lot of people out there, especially veteran OSINTers, use for these search terms that I call search terms, they use the term Google dorks. So things like putting quotation marks around phrases or using an asterisk or using file type or site or any of those search operators, they call those dorks. And it's just a term for those search operators. So there are people out there who will call it that. And I just stay away from that because I didn't grow up in that world.
Yes, sure.
So, but a lot of really, really good OSINTers use that term, Google dorking. So, but there's a whole list of the different ones that work the best. In future episodes, I really want to go more into a couple of the ones that are exclusive to Bing and how beneficial they are. And let's see what else is on here that I don't want to miss telling you about. Oh, I think I already mentioned and all caps doesn't even work with Google. So don't even bother trying it. What will work with Google though is to put a word in, say you really want that word to be in your search results, put a plus in front of it or put quotation marks around the word. And that pretty much forces Google to return results with that word. Because otherwise Google, a lot of times it tries to be really smart, tries to be smarter than you. Remember, it's kind of a form of an AI and it'll return synonyms. And if you don't want synonyms or if you want a verbatim search, there's a way to go up in the search results under tools. You can specify verbatim. That's all you want in your search is what you put in the search bar. You don't want it thinking for you and doing synonyms or doing alternative results or did you mean this? Like, say you misspelled something and Google thinks you should have spelled it a different way. It'll go, did you mean this word?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. As a matter of fact, I misspelled it on purpose. So yeah, you have to be smarter than Google. And it's not easy sometimes because Google thinks it's pretty smart.
Yeah.
Also, remember, if it isn't indexed, you're not going to find it on Google. Google's index has to index it for it to show up in a Google search result. So if it's not online, somebody hasn't digitized it and put it online, you're not going to find it. And a lot of people think, well, I couldn't find it on Google, so it must not exist. Well, that's not true. Not everything is online, or it just might not have been indexed yet. So if you want to look up the game score in real time, as hard as it is to admit it, you have to use X, formerly Twitter, which I hardly ever use anymore, but it is still a good search engine for real-time results. So there's usually a good anywhere from 2 minutes to 20-minute lag between what shows up on Google and what'll show up in Twitter.
Yeah. And I would say, just to add to that as well, things that I have forgot about, have used from time to time, but I do forget about it, is there's an advanced search feature in Google.
Yes, there is.
And that goes into that brings up a form that might help you, especially if you're really struggling to get the results that you're looking for, to be able to just go into that advanced search, and then it breaks down into a couple of different search.
You can search by time. It makes it. You can do all of the things that you can do in an advanced search form. Google will take up to 32 characters in a search engine, in a search bar. So you can, or 32 words. Anyway, it's a lot. You can do that, but yeah, using the advanced search form, which I think you do, if I remember right, advanced.google.com, or it might be advancedsearch.google.com. I'm not sure. But anyway, you might have to play around to find it, because it's not easy to find the advanced form.
Yeah, I think I usually get the results first, and then I see the advanced form at the top. So yeah, but it does. You can do stuff by date and by type. You can get into certain words, certain ones when you want to exclude language, region, last updated. So there's a couple of things in there that'll help you narrow or expand your search. So that's definitely something to consider.
Exactly. It's definitely worth considering. And then I'll post it another time on another show note, but I have a more extensive list of all of the search operators that you can use. For example, if you want a range of some things, for example, a range of dates, put your first date and then ... and then your second date, no spaces.
That's a good
one. And it'll do a range of search, a search for that date range.
Yeah.
But I'll build a more extensive list of all the different kinds of search operators. But yes, if you want to use advanced search, it really is a good option.
Yeah,
by the way, Bing does not have an advanced search. So that has to be considered also, depending on if you're looking for a different kind of search engine and you want to try Bing doesn't do advanced search.
Yeah, this reminds me of one of my favorite sayings: Google it on Yahoo and get the Bing results. So
well, eventually in future episodes, I'll get into a little bit about searching different AI like ChatGPT.
Yep,
because those are really blowing wide open what you can get. You can spend half an hour trying to figure out a really great search string for Google, or you can just ask ChatGPT.
Jan, this has been really great. Thank you so much for your time. Until next time, open secrets.
All right, you too. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. You can show your support by sharing this and other episodes found on our website at www.leapodcasts.com. If you have a topic you would like us to cover or have a suggestion for our next guest, please send us an email at leapodcasts@gmail.com. Till next time, analysts, keep talking.